Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. I'm your host, Julia, a PT turned product professional, joined by my delightful partner in crime co-hosts, Emma.
This is my tribe. This is how I think.
And Emily.
That is the best getting into PT story I've ever heard.
Founders of the Clinician Transition. Each episode, we interview former rehab professionals who have leveraged their clinical skills into non-traditional roles. I invite you to come hear the journeys, follow the career paths, and learn about the opportunities beyond these clinic walls. On today's episode, we interview Meredith Castin, the founder of the Non-Clinical PT, the #1 resource for PT, OT, and SLP professionals pursuing non-clinical careers. Her flagship Non-Clinical 101 course has helped more than 1,000 clinicians transition into the non-clinical world. Meredith has presented numerous times on the topic of non-clinical career paths, including at the APTA's Combined Sections meeting, several universities, and numerous state-level conferences. Her non-clinical PT networking groups comprise of more than 30,000 rehabilitation professionals, and her website reaches more than 40,000 readers each month. She is passionate about women and minorities having not just a seat at the table, but leading the path forward as the rehab professionals continue to stretch their wings into new horizons. You can find Meredith's program at thenonclinicalpt.com. And you can find Meredith in the Ozark Mountain region of Arkansas with her husband and 3 cats. And because it isn't enough to just have the pioneer of the non-clinical realm sit down with us today, I'd like to re-welcome Brandy Wilkins back to the show. For those of you who are silly enough not to listen to the previous episode featuring Brandy, she's a healthcare quality executive with a clinical background in physical therapy. Aside from currently serving as a quality and risk director and patient safety officer in an inpatient rehabilitation hospital in the Atlanta metro region, she is the founder and owner of Defining Point Coaching and Consulting, Brandy's self-designed program that she created to help clinicians transition into healthcare quality. Today, Brandy adds another role to her already impressive CV as my co-host. And now I know you're eagerly waiting at the edge of your seats, so here we go. Please enjoy this episode of Beyond These Clinic Walls with Meredith Castin and co-host Brandy Wilkins. Happy listening. My first question, Meredith, is what are your cats' names? I know you have 3 of them.
That's the best question ever.
Yeah.
That was not on the prep sheet. Sorry, don't throw you a curveball.
Oh, now I can remember them from memory. Luna, Django, and Sherlock. And unfortunately, Django is on his way to college pretty soon. So I don't know if we'll still have him by the time this episode is released.
Oh, all right. Well, if that's the case, Django, rest in peace.
Thank you.
I hope you're at the big litter box in the sky, having fun, living the dream, laying in a big sunbeam of light and doing all the other kitty things. But Meredith, welcome to Beyond These Clinic Walls. This is really exciting to have you on the show. I'm super pumped. You're our guest on the show today, but then I also have another guest host, Brandy. So excited to have you back on the show too. Really excited for this conversation today. This is going to be awesome.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. Thank you.
Yeah. So Meredith, I think to kick things off, I mean, you're a pioneer in the space. And I was curious if someone that's not in PT, not in rehab, was to meet you and ask you what you do, how would you answer that question?
Oh, it depends where and how I'm asked. One answer here locally is, I'm the one who's always wearing cat leggings biking around town.
I love it.
If it has to do with work stuff, I think people would probably know me as the founder of the Non-Clinical PT, which is a website that I started back in 2017, mainly just to create a resource for physical, occupational, and speech therapists and assistants, really, so that they have a resource to use when they want to do something else with their careers that doesn't involve direct patient care.
And it's grown so much beyond just a website. There's a ton of resources and a course now. Am I missing any other parts of it?
Yeah, well, it's a website, it's a course. There are tons of blogs. There's more than one course. We have a ton of other crash courses and a starter pack. And then I've got a course on blogging and all sorts of resources, really just kind of tailored to people to meet them wherever they are in their journey, because some people need a little bit of help and they can get away with reading the free resources like the blogs. the spotlights. Some people need a little bit more hand holding or want the hand holding. Some people want the full shebang and they want the community and the groups. And so I try to offer something for everybody on the site.
Yeah, it sounds like a menu of options that you can kind of create your own meal with to an extent.
Oh, yeah. As a buffet enthusiast, I would even...
As a buffet enthusiast, I love it. That might be your hashtag for this episode, buffet enthusiast. I think the community aspect of it is so important. I've met you through the community of LinkedIn and just networking. But you and Brandy have a little bit more of a history and transition. Brandy, do you want to take it away a little bit and talk about how you and Meredith met? And that was one of our questions too on it, how to make those connections and the transition. Brandy, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because Meredith and I have talked that we were going through this same process around the same time, but we didn't know each other at the time, where we were trying to transition out of patient care. And there were no resources. There was no community. There was no one telling us there was no path for us to take, because I know I transitioned right around that same time, 2013, 2014. And that's the time that Meredith was doing that also. And we connected actually on LinkedIn. I'll let Meredith tell a little bit more about it too, but we did a spotlight very early on, back in 2018, probably. We have connected on and off of LinkedIn since then.
What's a spotlight?
You can take this one too, Brandy, because you in the spotlight.
Yeah, so because I've transitioned out of patient care and I started moving towards healthcare quality and working in compliance, the spotlight is a feature that the non-clinical PT does on different clinicians that take a non-traditional path out of patient care. And so I was fortunate to be featured back, it was probably 2 years ago now, on how I transitioned into healthcare quality.
Yeah. And yeah, if you were in 2018, you're considered OG. And the thing is, we still need to update your spotlight because you've done so much since then. And we're grappling with that a lot. I apologize if I'm kind of derailing the conversation here.
No such thing.
Thank you. Well, we've really started to have a lot of the spotlight participants from early on come around and have really grown in their careers. And so we're grappling with this. It's a good problem to have, but it's how do we handle people wanting to update their spotlights? And so we do have some kind of solutions that we're working on for that are a little bit less time intensive than having people fill out all the same questions the same way. And
and I was wrong. It wasn't 2018. I had to go back and look it up. I'm like, was it that long ago? It was not that long ago. It was probably it was 2021.
Oh, okay.
But it was the very beginning. It was January of 21. So maybe it felt like it was a long time ago.
Yeah, you're like, it's been. There was a pandemic. It's fine. Yeah. We won't hold you to it.
A lot gone on since then.
How have you seen people from those initial people who transitioned to where they are now, where they're kind of those spotlight returners? Are they staying in the same path that they chose once they left? What are you seeing any patterns there? How are people progressing?
That's a great question. Honestly, it's been all over the map. I have had people stay in the same path. Like Brandy's grown and just evolved within the space that she was originally pursuing. And then I've seen people start out doing one thing and then they pivot and they go in a completely different direction, but they're still in the non-clinical world. Some people have left healthcare altogether. And then other people have stayed in healthcare, but still pivoted to something else. And then I even have one sole person who did go back to patient care, but she said it wasn't that she necessarily wanted to, but the company ended up being kind of shady. And so there was a return back to patient care, basically just for integrity reasons. And that's important. Something important to note really is that I think a lot of people do want to leave patient care because we do have a lot of ethical considerations and the productivity pushes and some of the just in certain settings, you're not always encouraged to practice in the most ethical way. And it is important to keep in mind that you could leave and land in a non-clinical company that's equally unethical. And so I love when people go non-clinical. It makes my heart sing. I think it's so cool for the profession. I think it's great for people's individual career growth, but it's not always going to be shinier and rosier on the other side. So,
Right. Yeah. Because you're still going into another career, and like any career, there's ups and downs with it too.
yes.
And you're still having to put the work in, find your way, really feel what fits. Do you see anyone who demonstrates a certain skill or has a certain pattern that sets them up for success fully when they go non-clinical?
Absolutely. I would say probably the number one skill that somebody can offer is being adaptable. And
Brandy's like,
I was going to say the same thing, like, yay!
I mean, and I've noticed it with everybody who's been sort of a pioneer or a leader or an influencer or whatever you want to call that in any sort of space. But I've really noticed that they're willing to be adaptable, and they're willing to really just kind of meet challenges head on and not say, oh, that's not possible, or not be negative about something. We live in a world where there's a lot to be negative about if we want to look at things that way. It's very easy to go into that headspace. And so just being open-minded, optimistic, and really believing in yourself and being adaptable tend to take people very, very far. It's the people who struggle more, and they're still successful, but it just takes a little bit longer, are the people who are a little bit more rigid, a little bit more limited in the ideas of what they want to do or what they think they're capable of doing. More importantly, really what they think they're capable of doing. I do think some of the culture in our profession, I have to put it delicately, I don't want to offend anybody, but I do think some of the culture in our profession tends to be very, if you're not a clinician, you're less than. And I've heard this echoed from many other people privately and publicly. And I think that there's a little bit of judgment and shame when you leave patient care, even if you leave to go into something like academia, or you go into public policy, or you go into public health, or these really honestly lofty professions where I think you do a lot of good. And I could argue that pretty much any path you can do a lot of good if you join the right company.
Right.
But
why do you think there is that stigma? Why do you think that stigma exists in rehab sciences specifically?
it's really hard to say, honestly, because sometimes it even exists within the people who are already out of patient care, and there's still, because I've seen it sometimes in academia where there's some judgment, oh, if you don't keep a PRN job and keep treating. And I think maybe that's honestly where it stems from. If I really, I've never really thought about this question too in depth until now, but if you think about that, a lot of the sort of culture is driven from academia and our profession in general. That's just a lot of the decision makers. And traditionally, they probably had a little bit more time on their hands to make decisions and get involved in local APTA chapters and everything.
Yeah.
And it might stem from that, saying, well, how can you teach this if you're not still actively treating? How can you stay up to date if you're not seeing patients? And so maybe that's where some of it stems from. And then it just kind of extends beyond that. So if somebody goes into marketing, do they really need to still be in patient care to be doing a good job? Probably not. But if you're in academia and you're teaching maybe Therex or you're teaching musculoskeletal courses, it is a little bit more important to stay up to date with both the evidence and keeping clinically active. So that would be my best. What do y'all think?
Well, I was going to say, I think it's because of the cost of the degree. And people feel, I mean, even like people internally, the people who are leaving patient care feel, oh my gosh, I paid all this money for this degree and I'm not using it for what it was initially intended for. But like you said, there's so many other ways that we can use our degree and still think clinically if we want to stay within the healthcare space, which not everyone does. But if you want to stay in healthcare space, you're still using the skills that you learned, no matter where you're using that degree. So I think it's just a mindset.
Yeah. And there are a couple of states that still have written into their practice acts some terminology that basically says if you're not clinically treating, then you can't keep your license active. And luckily, it's not the majority. There are only a few, and it's somewhat nebulous in the sense that you can often argue it and get it forgiven. At least that's what I've been told. I don't think it should be written into our practice acts that you need to stay clinically active to maintain a license, given that there's so many jobs out there that do require an active license. These non-clinical jobs, you have to have a clinical license to do them, but then you can't get punished for not treating clinically if you're already working these fairly demanding jobs. That does require that then you work on your weekends, and that's just not tenable for everybody. There's so many jobs that require you to have an active license, like utilization review and rehab liaison jobs. And there are a number of other ones where you have to have an active clinical license to do the job, but then you are not directly treating patients. And so to force somebody to have direct clinical practice hours would possibly rule them out of some of these jobs if they cannot take hours on outside of the clinic. So there's got to be a solution. And I think but this is again why therapists need to be at these decision-making conversations, and we need to be actively involved. And I also have an argument that we should be paid to be involved when we have large roles in our professional organization. Like decision-making roles should be paid roles. So we're working on potentially getting my course certified for CEUs.
That would be awesome.
Oh, it's really cool.
Fantastic. It is a huge endeavor. It's a huge undertaking, because another hill I'm willing to die on is that there is no there's no centralized course approving body for PT. At least for OT, you can go to AOTA, and they can usually get approved by AOTA as an approved provider, and then they can, once they're approved as a provider, then it's much easier to sort of submit a course and have it approved. It is you have to get approved by each individual state is a PT. I mean, there are states that have reciprocity, but it is a huge undertaking. And so for me, it's not even a money thing. It's a time thing, because it's a small company. It's just me basically. And so to be able to like take my course and submit it to every single state for CEU approval is just absolutely daunting. It is not off the table. I would love to get it approved. And there are all these other courses through MedBridge and through physicaltherapy.com, the continued series. And then I've noticed Summit has started adding courses. So there are non-clinical courses getting published that are CEU friendly, or, you get CEU credit for them.
More and more people are going into the non-clinical space. And along those lines, more and more people are doing what you have done as what I call the pioneer, and helping people to get into the non-clinical space. So do you think there's room for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's always kind of been my dream since day one. Is I've always thought, and this is something we've had conversations about, Brandy. And so the idea of someone like you who's kind of forged your way, and you've shown that you've grown in that path, and you have this keen interest, and you put out good content, and you want to mentor people. Oh my gosh, I would love to see people like you putting out CEU courses. And whether it's independently or it's under the umbrella of the non-clinical PT is like TBD. It really doesn't matter. I just would love to see, it really depends. Does somebody want to go through it's putting together a course is,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it'll give you an eye twitch if you didn't already have one. But it's fun for certain people. It's a lot of fun. For certain people, they're like, I just want to spread the word and put my information out there. Other people are like, no, it sounds really fun to do it all myself. So, but I would love to see people putting out more courses. Just there are all these great career paths. And when I created the name of my flagship course, Non-Clinical 101, I really did see it as a 101 level course, where eventually 201 level courses would come out. And I haven't worked in all 25 of the career paths that I cover. I've worked in like 3 of them. And so I would much rather work with somebody like you who's got your own course, your own resources, and promote those and say, okay, turn to Brandy if you want to know about quality, compliance, things like that. So yeah, absolutely there's space for people. And I see a really bright future, especially with women taking on a lot of these roles, because historically, I mean, this is another hill. I have a lot of hills I'm willing to die on. You will learn.
Talk about all of them. We're going for a hike. I love it.
Cats are better than dogs. I said it. No, but
hot takes with Meredith right now.
Shots fired.
Shots have been fired.
One of them is considering how many women are in the PT field, and then even more so really with OT and SLP. If you look at leadership traditionally, and I'm talking about like regional VP of sales or operations manager of XYZ chain of clinics, it's just a lot of white dudes. When I look at who's doing big things in the non-clinical space, and so that's where I really get excited when I think about influencing, these kind of influencers in the space and these non-clinical thought leaders. When I was looking at growth opportunities, I just always saw an inordinate amount of men in a lot of leadership roles. And I never really wanted to go into leadership anyway, but it was especially unpalatable to me at the time, because I was like, I don't really want to be in a good old boys club. I like working with women. And so it's been really fun running my site, because so much of the work that I've done involves women.
That's awesome.
How do you promote reaching out to women and minorities?
Oh,
how do you go about that? How do you uplift those people?
It's intentional. I mean, I find them, I stalk them. When I mean,
single
let me be clear. Let me be transparent. I should also qualify what stalking is. I mean, online. I'm not like
networking.
Networking. I don't have binoculars.
It's glorified stalking. I feel like it's networking.
I like that networking. The glorified stalking. Basically, I look for people who have a really unique career path, right? So the most important thing is that they've done something new and exciting and interesting. But then if I'm looking for somebody within that space, I'm going to look for somebody who maybe wouldn't normally have their voice be elevated in our traditional structural systems in America. So I want to make sure that I can give people the opportunity to share their voices if they're maybe younger than you would normally see too. I didn't even talk about ageism. Ageism is an issue, I think, and it goes both ways. You hear about it for older people. I really, really want to get more older people who've made the transition later in their career. I want to see people who are younger as well, because there's a bit of a sort of a stigma and judgment where it's like, oh, you have to put in X amount of clinical years until you get a chance to leave. We all know that's BS. I also want a lot more assistance, because that's something that's always really bothered me about the rehab professions is there's this sort of prevailing mentality, assistants somehow feeling or being treated like they're less than. And that's, again, BS. Some of the best clinicians I've ever met have been assistants. And then some of the best leaders I've ever met have been assistants. And so when I say underrepresented voices, I don't just mean gender, race, age. I mean, it's also who gets to really speak up for our profession. You know, physical therapy is not just physical therapists. It's also physical therapist assistants.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in the fact that you said ageism in the other way, because I'm seeing more and more clinicians who decide they want to pursue a non-clinical path while they're still in school, right? So they're in DPT school, or they're in for their OT program or their speech, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've done all this work and I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah.
How can I still use this without wasting this time?
Right.
And money, might I add. But how do I proceed? And then you have everyone who is looking at them in a certain way, because you're supposed to be a clinician first. You're supposed to see patients first. You know, I think that just goes back to what you were saying about ageism in the reverse, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I do hear that a lot. And I do get a lot of outreach from students who are having that sort of moment of panic that I had it in PT school. I can't speak for either of you, but I definitely had moments in school where I was like, oh no, this is not what I want to do. What have I done? It was a second career for me. So it was extra embarrassing and lame for me to be like, oh, just kidding. I want to do this. I get a lot of outreach from people like that. And what I've found, and I have to say anecdotally, because it's not like I've done intense studies of how many people have gone this direction, but it's strong anecdotal evidence. I honestly think it's pretty easy to make the switch out when you're fresh out of school, because you're still an open mind. You're still an open book at this point where you can still have chapters to be written. And so I think that ageism is a lot more of a challenge for older people, if we're being honest. But it's still possible. Plenty of older people in my network and people who've taken the course have gone on to lead successful non-clinical careers. It's just, I think for younger people, they are told, well, I had to do my time and put in X amount of years. And I see you both nodding, so you get it.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's like, I think that plays into that stigma so much. It's like, you didn't put your time in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, because I wanted to just change it. I was like, you look miserable. Let's spice things up a little bit. Let's try something new.
Yeah, well, and that's what brings you back to that adaptability, because I think younger people do tend to be very flexible, very adaptable. They haven't gotten set in their ways. And so that's why a lot of employers are more likely to take a chance on someone a little bit younger. But definitely, I think a lot of it comes from within the profession, and even from within some of the non-clinical people I've come across. And I have to sort of shut it down in some of my networking groups, because it's false. And some of the people saying it, I think it's because for them, it was a struggle. For them, it was a challenge. They might have taken a long time to make the switch because XYZ factors. But to tell somebody that's fresh out of school, who already knows they're miserable doing this, and they're in a saturated market trying to pay off loans on a really not great salary. To try to tell them that they can't do it is doing such a disservice to them. It's doing a disservice to the profession. It's doing a disservice to the people who want to stay in these saturated markets and treat patients and have actual career growth. So you're trying to guilt somebody into staying in and be a warm body that doesn't even want to be there. It's insane.
Everybody's journey is different.
Mm-hmm.
And people who have struggled in that profession sometimes I think feel like they have to make sure that others do that too before they can really shine. Yeah. But no, everyone can do it a different way. Like as you were talking through that, I was like, I would have been in complete panic after school to then try and navigate a career market because I was like, I have no skills. I don't know what to do. But then I was thinking there's other people there, and shout out to the tech summit, the rehab tech summit that happened this past year. There was kids there that were still in grad school in their doctorate, doing the research, looking at new jobs, asking smart questions, networking, talking to people. Like they're way ahead and they're crushing it. And they're already looking how to leverage their DPT in different ways. Hopefully with each, graduating class of rehab professionals coming out, we're pushing the boundaries of where those rehab professionals can sit in careers. So
I would love to see more non-clinical coursework taught in grad school. And it's been cool. I've had people reach out and ask for guest presentations and ask for that type of thing, but I'm not seeing the movement at the pace that I would like to see. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it, and this is, again, it's like anecdotal, but I think what part of it is the people who are oftentimes going through schools, you guys remember what it was like, right? You have one track mind. Just get through the practicals, get through the school, get through your tests. Don't cry in front of anybody. Drink caffeine after like midnight.
Yeah, or limit it to once a week of crying in front of people.
Exactly. So I just feel like people in that space, like when I would give these presentations, they would be interested, but I could tell the difference. Like when I presented at CSM 2020 before the world shut down, I just remember the difference in the level of engagement from that audience versus students is just night and day. And it's because when you're presenting to students, they really haven't even experienced patient care to any appreciable amount other than maybe a little bit of exposure to clinicals, maybe not. But even if they're already thinking about long-term plans, the short term is right there. It's like, get me through this. I just need to get my license and then I'll figure things out. And so I think it is a little bit harder to get the engagement and the demand there from students. And so a lot of the professors know that it's something that would be really helpful, but it's not necessarily something that students are asking for. Whereas they might be asking about, okay, we need a course on clinic ownership. We need a course on cash-based care. Or we need a course on XYZ other thing, like a specialized vestibular course. And that's awesome. I think it's great. So it's just one of those things where I try to meet people where they are and provide resources for people where they are. And I guess the best thing I can do for a student is say, this is very possible. And the earlier you start thinking about these things and really exploring what your options are and taking personality tests. That's a huge part of my course is really doing self-assessments and personality tests and understanding what makes you tick as a person, what energizes you and what makes you feel depleted, and then matching those to possible career paths down the road. Then you don't have to be taking entire courses as part of your PT curriculum. I mean, it'd be cool, but you don't need to be doing that. All you really need to be doing is just thinking ahead and going, okay, well, if I know I want to go into technology, then it probably makes the most sense, stroke technology specifically, it probably makes sense that I work in a setting that has a high population of stroke patients. And I mean, just basically thinking like that, because if they're deciding between, say, peds and going into rehab technology, there's some pediatric technology out there, but a lot of the hot tech right now is around stroke and neuro rehab. So just understanding kind of what's out there, understanding where they want to be, and then going, well, at least that makes that one little decision about where I start my career that much easier, that maybe I choose to work with geriatric population versus pediatric population right away. Unless they've identified a piece of technology in the peds space that they're like, I have to work for this company, in which case, screech, halt, U-turn, maybe start with some peds jobs.
I think in PT school too, or any kind of school, they could potentially, you know how they have clinicals for everything, but then you have this elective. Why can't they do an elective that is a non-clinical based elective, like tech or administration or academia or quality or whatever it is, to be able to see those things while they're in school, but not at the level where it's overwhelmed, and they can choose kind of what else they may want to do.
I think that's a great idea. And it's something that might need to be a grassroots effort where people who live in the vicinity of a PT school reach out and say, hey, I'd really like to teach this elective.
Hey there, Beyond These Clinic Walls listeners. Before we dive back into the episode, I have something special to share with you. I know at this point you are beyond ready to start your non-clinical career journey, so what better way to kickstart your career transition than taking your first steps with Meredith's Non-Clinical 101 course. Non-Clinical 101 is an online career course that helps you discover the ideal career path for you. You tackle the job search with confidence and finally transition into a job you love. This class has got you covered. From understanding your strengths and interests to crafting a winning resume and acing your interviews, this course has it all. And right now, Meredith has something special for our Beyond These Clinic Walls listeners. You can get 20% off discount right now on the course by using the code BTCW20, like the numbers, PCT. That's BTCW20 PCT. So if you're ready to take your career to the next level and explore the world of non-clinical healthcare jobs, head on over to the Non-Clinical 101 and enroll today. All right, let's get back to our discussion. I wanted to loop back really quickly because I think we started talking and overall the impression I got was that for grad school in rehab sciences, there really needs to be a systemic change with the offerings that are given. And I wonder about the feasibility of that actually happening because there is so much you have to put into a curriculum. And now the courses are even, or the length of the program is even getting shorter. A 3-year program, some are doing it in like two and a half. It's getting shorter. But I think the exposure in grad school needs to change. And the people that are ready to move right when they once they graduate really early on, those like fresh graduates, they've already probably done the research and had exposure and elsewhere. So I think with what comes with experience once you're in the clinic is having more exposure and seeing the holes and everything, but that at a different pace to everyone. If we can implement that more in grad school, I think that'd be great, but I just don't know how possible it is. I think there'd be so many things that we could include. Yeah. What do you think would be an opportunity for that? Like, how would we get students engaged? Because they almost have to have that exposure to then have the motivation to then have the ability to absorb it. So how do we get students engaged?
Yeah, I think guest lecturing and meeting them where they are. And how do you get anybody engaged? You ask them what they're interested in. So you have to kind of know enough about what you want to talk about to be prepared to answer the types of questions people have. But younger people tend to be interested in technology. They tend to be interested in things like remote opportunities and remote care delivery and things like that. And so I think focusing on the right career paths that they could have and then focusing on the impact that they could make too is another important one, because there are plenty of non-clinical careers where you can use your degree in education and you make some degree of impact, but it's not going to be any more or less than maybe what you make in the clinic. Whereas there are other careers where you can make a huge impact. And that's always been really important to me. And I think as a student, my ears maybe would have perked up if they said, there's a different way to make an impact beyond putting your hands on a patient and treating them. And someone else might be attracted to, oh, there's a different way to make all this money that you need to make to pay off your loans. And that would look like XYZ, or there's a different way to travel the world beyond direct patient care as a travel clinician. And there are jobs for all of these paths. You could be a medical science liaison or go into sales, and you could end up doing just as much traveling or more as a traveler, really more. And you could make a lot more money in the process. And then you're still making an impact. It might not feel as impactful as maybe being an entrepreneur or being, in some sort of tech role where you're doing product development for a new piece of technology. And so it really just depends on what somebody wants out of their career. But a couple of things that I think that most PTs want to do are make an impact, really feel like their work matters, and feel like at least what they pursue is going to make all of their work worth it. And one of you, maybe it was both of you, we were kind of talking about that sunk cost feeling of, well, I've already invested. It was Brandy. We've already invested all this time and money and energy into PT. And so I think really drawing the parallels of, you couldn't do this work as well if you didn't have your PT degree. And so again, it's going to take a special type of person to kind of pitch that to the university. It's going to take the right type of university to be able to say, this is exactly what our students need. I think it's very possible. I think people should be out there doing it if they have a non-clinical role. Reach out to your local university. You had asked where it starts. I mean, it starts with a guest lecture. Volunteer. You're probably not going to get paid, but volunteer. That might turn into a course. It might turn into a paid course, and just kind of go from there. But I know there are rumblings. I've spoken with a number of people who are in academia, and they're saying, "Oh, we're adding non-clinical to our curriculum." But
that's
you know the glacial pace that academia tends to move.
Yeah.
So these conversations are really happening a lot behind the scenes, and we just we're going to see the fruits in like 5-10 years. Hopefully sooner.
Hopefully sooner. I think there is a level of like change management behind it too, and just diversifying what resources we're giving people. You said how in graduate school, one of the things you can do is like the personality tests and figuring out what person. So like hitting it from those different angles and really discovering self-discovery and like who you are and what you're drawn to. Sounds cliche, but I think that's one step into being an independent thinker and learner where you want to go with your career, just because, and that really opens up more tracks for your career for you too, once you can figure yourself out.
Absolutely. I've put that on my resume in the past, and it was pretty effective. I've put results from different personality tests.
Oh,
and
really?
The person doesn't know the personality test, which most of the time they don't, but sometimes they do. And even if they don't, it's a great talking point because you can say, oh, well, I'm XYZ type on this thing. And it means that I love building relationships and I love one-on-one and then you have the opportunity to, to ask about them. And then they can really start to envision you as part of their team or not envision you as part of their team. But even if it works against you and they go, oh, wow, that's not the type of personality we want on our team. Isn't it great that you find out now instead of joining the team and being like, oh, I don't even like this any better than patient care job. Yeah, I mean, I have noticed with people and going non-clinical in general, if you give them more agency over their own processes of doing it and give them homework, especially through when I've done coaching and one-on-one kind of exercises with people, but even in the course, people are encouraged to go out, okay, you've identified you want to do this career path. Okay, here's some XYZ steps to take now. Because giving people that agency, we know as therapists, is very important. You give them their home exercises. And if you just kind of like hand them a sheet of paper and say, oh, whatever, it's not going to do much. But if you say, hey, if you do these exercises, then XYZ will happen. And you kind of let them realize that there's like a cause and effect relation here.
Yeah, totally.
That was a good topic. I think I want to switch gears a little bit. So you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And a lot of students have gone through your non-clinical one-on-one course, and you've done spotlights on a lot of different people in a lot of different industries or ways that they've used their clinical degree. Which one has stood out to you the most? Or what's your greatest success story?
Oh gosh. Well, this is going to sound like the cheesiest cop-out answer ever, but honestly, I can't say one because there have been so many. There have been so many success stories. And I think probably the ones that stick with me the most are the ones where people thought it's not going to happen for me, because that is the number one email topic, or when people reach out and they're going through the course, or I see it in my groups a lot. It's like doubt. Yeah. And they're seeing all these people around them. They're seeing all the highlight reels and success stories. It's just like social media is, which we all know it's a double-edged sword, right? So they're seeing all these people's success stories on social, and they're not realizing the grinding and the effort that people have put in to get where they are. And yes, there are plenty of stories where things have fallen into people's laps. And those are always the spotlights or the success stories where it's just like, okay, well, perfect example is this one woman I know who took my course, and then we actually became friends because we both lived in San Diego together. And then I happened to send her a job listing, and she got the job, and it just all went really fast.
It's just
really
perfect.
Well.
Yeah.
And it went all great. And that's
Good
great.
for her.
Well, she sticks out to me because she had that sparkling energy and that adaptability and that great personality, which I feel like she's not going to have any problem getting a non-clinical job. So she stuck out in that sense. But then the ones that really stick with me and are probably like some of the patients you guys remember, where it's like, okay, here's someone who maybe also has a really sparkling personality and also is really adaptable and is doing everything right. And for some reason, it's not working, right? They're just not getting traction. And I have like this is going to age me. I have a Rolodex filled with people. And it's like, you can call it a smile file or anything else, but it's like a parchment scroll unrolling across the floor, filled with people's names where they thought it wasn't going to happen for them. And then it did. And so, of course, those ones stick out. And then there are people like who have gone into UX. And Brandy, you and I were kind of talking about how there are people who are branching off and becoming thought leaders. But I mean, they all stick out because every single person who tells me they got a job, whether they took my course or not, I take a screenshot and I am just like, hell yeah. Because this is the type of stuff that when I got started, it was like the stuff of dreams. I mean, I was so embarrassed to even tell my classmates that I didn't want to do what I was doing. I was embarrassed to tell my family. I was embarrassed. I mean, luckily I have a very supportive husband and we share everything. So he was cool. But it just was, I wanted to do something related to what I put all of my effort into. So I don't know, when I get these stories and I hear these success stories, every single one sticks with me. And I think the ones that stick with me the most are the people who had to try the hardest, because I had to try really hard and it took me so much effort and work. And I cried during the process and felt stupid and worthless. And so it really pulls on my heartstrings when people feel that same way and they feel like it still just reminds me of where I was. And so when I have these people that I personally work with the one-on-one coaching and taking the course or whoever it is, when they come through and they get these like awesome jobs that are beyond what I could have ever done. And then they land these killer jobs and it's like, yes.
So when you first started out, how did all your students find out about you in the early days?
Oh, yeah.
Because social media wasn't what it was now, right? And you were one of the first in the space. So how did you start that momentum?
Well, it was really interesting because I got the idea for doing this when I was working at a blog called New Grad Physical Therapy. And it's a really, really long story that you can probably find on other podcasts if you're really interested. But when I ended up not working there anymore, I left. So I had been sort of informally mentoring, I'd say maybe 20, 25 people who were subscribers to that website. And they wanted to stay in touch, or they would reach out to me when we would send out these job alerts, like, hey, here are all these clinical jobs for new grads. They would write back to me and be like, oh, hey, I don't think I want to do patient care. What do I do? Perfect example being that woman that I mentioned earlier, where she took the course. We became friends because she was local to San Diego, and then she got the job. She was one of those early people. So she had reached out to me when she was in PT school and said, hey, I really want to do something else. I already know this, but what do I do? And so we would chat, we would email, those types of things. It was very informal at that point. And I got the idea because when I was working there, I wanted to incorporate it into the site, and they were like, it doesn't really fit our business plan. We're barely even focusing on rehab at this point. Long story. So when I ended up leaving that job, I started this blog on the side. And so I had probably like 25 people or so who already were, I don't know how to put it. I guess just kind of like my people, my original friends, my circle. They were my tribe. We were really in it together because I had gotten out, but like barely. I mean, I was only a year out of patient care, and then they all wanted out, but they didn't know how to do it. And like another early one is Amanda Van Frank, and she's now a program manager, I think, at Cedars-Sinai in LA. She's like a badass. Anyway, so many people who were like my early mentees or people that I coached early on have moved on. And so I kind of brought them with me, for lack of a better term. And I said, listen, I'm leaving this job and I'm going to work at a content agency that has nothing to do with healthcare. And this is like a total side note, but I'm starting this blog on the side basically because I feel like I'm abandoning a good sector of people that is a growing number of people who want out. So I'm going to write about my experiences transitioning out and making the leap, and any kind of like tidbits and pearls or people that I meet when I get out, I'm going to write about them. I'm going to keep in touch with the people I did come across. And so that was, you asked how it took off, Brandy. And I feel like it was between that, just kind of having people with that. And then I use a lot of search engine optimization to get people to find my website. And I'm just a total SEO nerd, talking about like what sparks joy. That's my Marie Kondo thing, is like SEO sparks joy for me. And social media does not spark joy at all for me. So I don't. and then, but then I guess really it came down to that, and then a combination. And then I wrote sort of what I used to call like my swan song or magnum opus. But I wrote this really long article that the people that I was working with at NGPT did not want me to publish at the time, because they were like, nobody wants to read about what it was like for you leaving patient care. And I was just like, I don't know, I kind of feel
everyone does.
Yeah. It was a hunch. It was one of those things where I was like, I'm just going to do this. And so I kind of, as like a parting gift to them, because I knew this article would go viral. I just knew in my heart that it was going to go viral. It was like late 2017, and it was Physical Therapy Burnout is Destroying Our Profession, or I think that was the title of it. And it went freaking viral, like crazy viral at the time. And that I knew it would be popular. I didn't know it would go viral. I guess I'll put it that way. But it was like parting gift. And then in it, I was like, hey, anybody who wants to continue keeping in touch, I've got this blog that I'm starting, and I'm going to keep writing about these topics, and go for it. Follow me if you want, keep in touch. And that's what I didn't expect. Like I figured the few people, people would read the article, be like, burnout is a problem. And so then a very small sector of them, like my 25 tribe members or whatever, they would go, okay, well, I'm going to follow her blog. But it was way bigger than that. And so I already had a couple of hundred people right away that were already kind of reaching out through that initial contact form. And from the moment I started this new non-healthcare writing job, I was already overwhelmed by people being like, hey, can I schedule a call? And so that's kind of how the site got going and got moving. And I was doing one-on-one coaching for a while, and that's what the basis of the course became, because it was like, I'm telling the same exact advice to every single person on a call, and I could save them a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of frustration by just putting this into a course. And then if they still need help, then we can talk about doing some coaching. So I hope that
was how you started. That's how your rise to non-clinical domination. So what can your network expect from you next? What's on the horizon for Meredith and the non-clinical PT?
Oh, well, looking ahead, I would love to do, get non-clinical 101 approved for CEUs. I have no timeline for this, but given that we are looking at most likely for the first time ever actually doing a little bit of hiring, and I'm going to be doing hiring within my non-clinical 101 network specifically, I will put more interest and focus into getting approved for CEUs. That is still something that I really seriously want to pursue. Talking about more non-clinical 101 only initiatives, this is, at least for now, it's a non-clinical 101 only initiative, but I'm going to most likely be offering some sort of formal career services with mentorship, meaning actual coaches and mentors that have done the Brandy Wilkins, and they have, they've elevated themselves and grown in a career basically. And they've shown that they not only have the interest and the desire, but they've moved up, and that they've shown that they've been putting out content and paying it forward and things like that. And so I actually do have a few things kind of up my sleeve and a few coaches that I'm working with, and hoping to potentially expand that based on how much interest there is, because I know there's a lot of interest for one-on-one mentorship and coaching, and it's there. It's just what I have found from anecdotally, again, if somebody has not taken my non-clinical 101 course first, a lot of times they have no freaking idea what's out there, and they don't know how to get there. And so there is a lot of benefit to having networking groups. I have this ginormous networking group on Facebook, and I see the same questions come up over and over, because the nature of these groups is that there's a reason why teachers have curriculum, and it's not just people talking in class and being like, oh, you're interested in math? I'm interested in math. And so I think that going through the structured coursework,
That's so perfect.
Curriculum and structured coursework. And I worked with educators to put together the coursework because I wanted it to be engaging. And I worked with a career counselor. My sister's a career counselor, and other professional coaches and a resume writer. So the reason I did it the way that I did, and the reason I feel that the course is so successful at getting people good results, is that it's structured in a way that you can go through it and then come out of the course at least with a better idea of what you want to do. Do you want to do tech? Do you want to travel? Do you want to do sales? Do you want to be in a thought leadership role where people are turning to you for your expert advice? Or do you want to be a little bit more behind the scenes? Because there are entire personality types that match where it's like, this person's an excellent behind the scenes person. And that type of person might totally excel in one career path and not another. And so that's sort of what we're working on with the non-clinical 101 kind of internal career services thing is these people already know, or they have a decent idea of what types of work they want to do. And then I can help them identify which coach, mentor, strategist, whatever we decide to call those people, they will be best suited to work with. And
that's awesome.
I want people to get the best possible results. And who knows, we may or may not open it up to people who haven't taken the course. But again, I want people to get the most bang for their buck and get the most for their money, because it's an investment to do coaching. It's an investment to do anything that you do. So if you can set somebody up where comes back to that curriculum idea, but you set them up to kind of go through something and walk through. Step 1 is this, you identify what you want to do. Step 2 is this, you get out of your own way, you discover what's out there, whatever it is. And then step 3 is maybe the resumes and the cover letters and the networking and the application. And I see a lot of people jumping to that without really figuring out what they want to do. And so that's
such an important step.
It is. So and I think a lot of people skip it because
and then get discouraged and then
exactly.
And then are like, oh, no, I can't do it. I'll just stay in patient care forever, or whatever it might be. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I know all our listeners are like, oh my gosh, I need to know more about Brandy after what she just said there. So much. So what you can do is just go back an episode and go listen to Brandy's episode, because she was our guest not too long ago. And it was a absolute delight of a guest to have. So go listen to that
so
too. Emma's not here. She always wraps it up for us. So I'm going to do my best. Shout out to Emma. Meredith, you've done so much for the community. What can we do for you?
Oh my gosh, thank you. Honestly, just keep paying it forward. That's what I always ask of anybody is if you get into a position where you feel like you're kind of a pioneer, or you feel like you're the first of your kind at your hospital or your clinic in a particular role, then pay it forward and bring somebody else with you. That would be the greatest gift you could do for me. And that's what got me started with the spotlights is I felt like if we could get people who had already gotten there, and it sounds like it's what you're doing with the podcast. You find somebody who's gone somewhere that you think is really interesting and you want to see other people go, and you interview them and you kind of pick their brain and figure out how it worked. And that's what I would love to see more people doing, is sharing their stories and reaching out and lifting up other people. And again, don't always lift up the most obvious choices. Lift up people who you might think don't have opportunities. It might be somebody who doesn't have the same educational opportunities normally, or maybe they just don't have the same age range that you are, or they don't look like you, or they don't speak like you do, or have the same beliefs. But consider them for roles that you feel like maybe they would be a good fit for, and just kind of pay it forward.
Meredith, thank you so much for being on our show. This was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I really had a great time chatting with you ladies. Y'all are awesome. And I'll come back anytime if you ever want to have me back.
I love it. Yeah, definitely.
Hey, write that down. She said, I heard it.
Yeah, we heard it.
We'll go on a ride. We'll do a bike ride and podcast.
Yeah, the next one will be bike rides and cats. I'm excited. And a very special thank you to my wonderful guest co-host, Brandy Wilkins. Brandy is the owner of Defining Point Coaching and Consulting. Make sure you check out her newly launched program, Kairos Academy. This is Brandy's self-designed program that she created to help clinicians transition into healthcare quality. This program gives you the tools you need to succeed in healthcare quality and focuses on things like enhancing the patient experience, improving clinical outcomes, and reducing preventable harm. If healthcare quality is a career path you're interested in, then this program is the map to help you successfully navigate it. And what better map is there to follow than someone who's gone through the steps themselves? And for your convenience, the website link is in this episode's bio, so go check it out. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. As always, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Beyond These Clinic Walls for all the latest updates and episode releases. Make sure to join the Clinician Transition group on LinkedIn and Slack to be part of the networking community for like-minded rehab professionals. Questions, comments, concerns, or do you know someone who might make an excellent guest on our next show? Reach out to us at beyondtheseclinicwalls@gmail.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.